Camille, to NLP or not to NLP? That is the question. No, that is not really the question. The question is, how do you see the value of NLP? And are there some techniques you found valuable to use with your clients? Okay. NLP did an amazing job. Think about it. Think about how amazing that modeling process was to look at the work of Fritz Perls, to go to Virginia Satir, to talk to Gregory Bateson, to talk to Erickson, and find out the difference that made the difference. What were these people doing that was magical, that somehow had an effect? In some cases, Erickson was very much trance, of course. Virginia Satir was very much information gathering and working with parts, and the way she did work with families, etc. And so that was a remarkable feat when you think about it. They then packaged it and sold it as a product, and very incredibly successfully, of course, right across all kinds of disciplines: education, management, sales. But importantly, let's look at therapy. The NLP techniques that Bandler and Grinder, I would say also, and the others associated with that group at the time, that were modeled on Erickson, if you like, number one, Erickson. Those particular techniques, of course, they're NLP, they're kind of, it's like looking at what Erickson did and somehow packaging it in a way that could be taught easily and learned easily and applied easily if you follow those step-by-step instructions, if you like. NLP, fantastic. They did an amazing job of that. I personally, when I teach techniques, let's say like a phobia treatment, okay, like the VK dissociation, it was called back then, when it was taught back in the 80s, first of all, in Santa Cruz and everywhere else later. That particular technique works. It's got a series of steps. It developed into something called the rewind technique. It's very effective. Very, very effective. Now, if you take that one technique, okay, when I teach that, or how to work with phobias, I would teach that as a structure and then tell people to forget about it. That is, don't use it as a technique, use it as a set of principles, find your own way of doing it. And, the book, Jos Van Boxtel's book about my work, called Stephen Brooks and the Art of Compassionate Ericksonian Hypnotherapy. There's a transcript of a session there, a phobia session, which uses the principles of that VK dissociation, but there's no sitting in a cinema and all that stuff, all the stuff that you do with NLP. We're working with clouds and things like this in the sky. So I'm kind of working in a more Ericksonian way, and that's where NLP developed that from. Okay, so I think there's great value in NLP as long as it's done in hypnosis. Some of the questioning skills, the meta model skills, for example, the whole idea of transformational grammar from Noam Chomsky, etc., and Virginia Satir's work. I think when you look at that's a great package of information gathering that you can use in Ericksonian hypnotherapy. I don't know whether Erickson used those. I don't think he did. I'm not certain of that because there's not much information about his information gathering in the books on Erickson. So having that as an adjunct is great. And if you look at the field of strategic therapy, the work of Bill O'Hanlon, for example, who's a great guy, amazing teacher, retired from doing this now, unfortunately, becoming a songwriter instead. Lovely man. He developed that kind of idea of information gathering because with strategic therapy, you need to get solid quality, good, verifiable information and then to create tasks around that information. And so he took that, and other people in that field, Paul Watzlawick and other people working in that field, took it, Steve Shazer, took it further and introduced it as part of, if you like, the Erickson work, but not so much with trance, although they integrated with trance as well. So there is a room for NLP. I have nothing against NLP. I used to have feelings against the NLP when it's taught and used in a very, very clinical, dry, mechanical way, because no two people are the same. So if you can take the principles and adapt it, I think that's absolutely fine. Okay, let's have a look. Catherine Wood. Okay, she's referring to a case study I talked about a little while back. And let me tell you what the case study is first, and you'll understand her question. I think it was a case study where I hypnotized someone back to a time before their eyesight started deteriorating. And when I brought them back to the present, I left their eyes hypnotized in the past, if that makes sense. Okay, so I regressed the client and at the same time back to childhood, and then left the eyes regressed at that age, like 7 years of age or something like that. I can't remember. So when I brought them back, they could see better than they could have done. But the question was, were they really seeing something clearer, or was this an hallucination constructed by the unconscious mind to make them think they were seeing things clearly? We didn't really know. Okay. So her question is, could we use this technique with abuse, like sexual abuse? The idea being, could you regress a client to a time prior to the abuse and create an amnesia for the abuse? Okay, well, first of all, with the eyesight case, I didn't create an amnesia as such. What I did was leave the eyes regressed at a certain age, which meant it hadn't yet experienced the thing to be amnesic for. That makes sense. So I didn't give suggestions for amnesia because I couldn't give suggestions for something that hadn't yet happened. There was an implication, of course, that they wouldn't remember it because the eyes had never grown up through that experience of deteriorating. So it was an implied amnesia, but it wasn't an amnesia as such. I'd regressed. So could we use that technique to regress somebody before abuse? Now think about this. It's not just the eyes, it's the whole person. If we'd left that person back, let's say at the age of 7 before the abuse occurred, which is possible to take them back before an event, absolutely. But if we'd have left them there, who are we bringing back to the present? We have to bring the person back, right? So in terms of using that eyesight technique or case study as an example, we can't do that because, you can bring a person back and leave their eyes there, or their belief about what their eyes are experiencing. But to bring the whole person back after saying that it never happened is a big more of a task, of course. So although we can change the past in terms of changing the way we represent it, if you like, in our minds, by changing the actual content of what happened, and or changing how we perceive it, that means like in a different form of sensory modalities, in terms of this, if there's a strong auditory component, make that fade, a bit like with submodality work in NLP, in fact. Then we can do that as well. But it's different from the technique with the eyesight. Okay, so that answers your question, I think. We couldn't use that technique to do the same thing.